Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch, where every week we read out of a genre novel. Sometimes we repeat our novels. And that's what's going to happen today with our third reading out of Frankenstein. Frankenstein is obviously Mary Shelley's masterpiece, classic work that inspired countless horror and science fiction properties. To this day, we have the Barnes& and Noble edition, with the quote on the back, "You are my creator, but I am your master, obey." And if you've read the book, you know at what point that occurs. One thing that's interesting about the book compared to the film adaptations is that it's framed in a different way. Uh, Seaman, Seaman Walton is going around Antarctica, or the Arctic, I believe, and he finds Victor Frankenstein at the end of Victor Frankenstein's journey. There's sort of a dynamic between them where Victor is trying to keep Walton from making the same mistakes that he made, while the monster lurks nearby. So I'm flipping to the end, where Frankenstein will meet his end, and perhaps the monster will as well. September 12th. Again, the letters are Walton's doing, the narrative is Victor Frankenstein's, and then when most things are, and when in the middle of the novel you have most things in like quotation marks, that'd be the monster, because there's three POV characters, all nested within each other in this novel. So, letter Walton, September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory. I have lost my friend. But I will endeavour to detail these bitter circumstances to you, my dear sister, and while I am wafted toward England and towards you, I will not despond. September 9th, the ice began to move, and roarings like thunder were heard at a distance, as the island spilt and cracked in every direction. We were in the most imminent peril, but as we could only remain passive, my chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked behind us and was driven with force toward the north. A breeze sprung from the west, and on the 11th the passage toward the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and that their return to their native country was apparently assured, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and long continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked the cause of the tumult. "They shout," I said, "because they will soon return to England." "Do you then really return?" "Alas, yes. Alas, yes, I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return. Do so if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak, but surely the spirit to assist my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength." Saying this, he endeavored to spring from the bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored, and I often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes. He breathed with difficulty and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had certainly not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought he slept, but presently he said to me in a feeble voice, and bidding me come near, said, "Alas, the strength I relied on is gone. I feel that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy, my persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that burning hatred and ardent desire of revenge I once expressed. But I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last days I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness I created a rational creature, and was bound towards him to assure, as far as it's in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty. But there was another still paramount to that. My duties toward the beings of my own species had greater claims to my attention because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused. And I did right in refusing. To create a companion for the first creature, he showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness and evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to destruction beings who possessed exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself, that he may render no other wretched, he ought to die. The task of his destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish and vicious motives, I asked you to undertake my unfinished work, and I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason and virtue. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task, and now that you are returned to England, you will have little chance of meeting with him. But the consideration of these points and the well-balancing of what you may esteem your duties I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think is right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other respects, this hour, when I momentarily expect my release, is the only happy one which I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discovery. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. Yet another may succeed. His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sunk into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted to speak again, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, and the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow, my mind is overshadowed by a cloud of disappointment. But I journey toward England, and I may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight, the breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again there is the sound as of a human voice, but hoarser. It comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein still lie. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God, what a scene has just taken place! I am yet dizzy with the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it, yet the tale which I have recorded would be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated and most admirable friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find words to describe. Gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended, in color and apparent texture like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror, and sprung towards the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, of such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily, and endeavored to recollect what were my duties with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay. He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turning toward the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by the wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. That is also my victim, he exclaimed. In his murder, my crimes are consummated, and this miserable series of my being is wound to its close. O Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I, who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold, he cannot answer me. His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend and destroying this enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached the tremendous being. And I won't spoil too much of the rest of this confrontation, except the ending, where he sprung from the cabin window as he said this upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in darkness and distance. So that is the canonical end of Frankenstein and his monster in the original novel, and you don't see that in most adaptations. Most adaptations sort of deviate into their own thing based on the themes that they're trying to explore for their things. The 1931 Universal film has a burning windmill take out both. Of course, both are retconned to be alive in 1936's, or 35, whichever year, Bride of Frankenstein. And I think multiple cuts of both of those might have existed, wherein Colin Clive's Henry Frankenstein lived or died. I'd have to check on that. Other adaptations stray even further. The burning windmill is a big motif. Fire is a big motif in killing the monster, as well as sinking into an abyss. And Frankenstein sometimes survives, sometimes dies. Frankenstein's monster survives his deaths oftentimes, and I find it interesting and poignant that in this, the end of this novel, the end of Frankenstein's monster is something that Frankenstein's monster himself chooses to do. that may be the only tenable way to kill Frankenstein's monster, is to have him choose to do so, because he can survive pretty much anything else in pop culture. This is a bunch of musings, but it's very interesting, this novel, and you should read the entire thing up to this ending. Here at Plan9Crunch, we do one of these every week. On our YouTube channel, you'll also find all sorts of other content. We have a blog at plan9crunch.com. We have a Facebook page. And thank you. That's all. That's a wrap.